Okay, still working in section 5. We are adding to our still life project to finish the section 5A assignment. So go ahead and open your still 4 from the section 4, and we're going to resave it. So go to save as and then call it still 5 and save it to your section 5 assignments folder. So we have this saved as still 5, and now we can get to work. First, we're going to set up our workspace. If you haven't done so already, go to View, Zoom, and Page just to make sure your whole page is showing. Then we're going to click on the Layer menu and open up our Layers panel. And in our Layers panel, we're going to make sure that all of the layers are locked. So if they're not locked, go ahead and lock them, because we're going to be making some adjustments, and we don't want to accidentally make some adjustments on a layer that we didn't intend to make. So go ahead and lock all your layers. And then in the Object menu, select Fill and Stroke to open up our Fill and Stroke panel. And then make sure your Fill tab is selected. Now we're going to make some adjustments to our glass items in our image. So as you can see, here's your text. Glasses don't really look like, like they have black outlines around them. They look like there are some reflection and some highlights, which you should have read about in the earlier text in this section. So we're going to work on adding some reflection and some highlights to our glasses to make them look a little more realistic. So we're first going to work with our decanter. So we can go ahead and unlock that decanter layer so that we can make some adjustments to it. So unlock your decanter layer, then go ahead and select it. And when selecting your decanter, make sure that you did not select any of the liquid inside. We're just going to make some adjustments to the glass part of it. So now we're going to go to our Fill and Stroke panel, and we're going to select the Linear Gradient button in order to add gradient to our decanter. And then in our toolbox, we want to select our gradient tool. So again, mine's down here. If your toolbox doesn't have room, it's probably down here too. So select your gradient tool. And then on the canvas, on the gradient line, click the square stop to select it. So square stop is right there. And in the Fill and Stroke panel, in the HSL tab, on the lightness slider, we're going to click and drag the arrows all the way to the right. So with our lightness slider, we're moving it all the way to the right. And the alpha slider, it says to click and drag the arrow to about 110. So I'm just going to go ahead and type in 110. And maybe not. Maybe I'll drag it to 110. Oh, okay. Hopefully your alpha slider is not as testy as mine is, but try and get it as close to 110 as possible, so it should be looking something like mine right now. And then on the canvas, on the gradient line, we're going to click the circle stop to select it next. So select the circle stop. And in the Fill and Stroke panel, on the lightness slider, click and drag the arrows all the way to the right. So again, we're sliding our lightness all the way to the right here. And then on the alpha slider, click and drag the arrow all the way to the left. So grab your alpha slider and drag it all the way. So we want it completely transparent. So it's going to be all the way to the left. Then the right end of the gradient is completely transparent. So it should look something like mine at this point. Then on the canvas, on the gradient line, click and drag the circle stop to the middle of the decanter. So we're clicking the circle stop and we're dragging it to right about the middle of our decanter. And it says if you don't like how the gradient looks, click and drag the two gradient stops until you like how it looks. So if you like how this looks, that's great, or you can angle it a different way, however you'd like, whatever you think looks best. I might drag mine down just a little bit. There. So now we're going to move on to our glass. So go ahead and click your selection tool, and then over in our layers panel we can unlock our glass layer, and then go ahead and select your glass and then hold down shift to select that ellipse at the top of the glass so we have the whole thing selected. And in order to avoid having to hold shift down and clicking to select all of our glass at once, what we can do with having both of those selected by holding shift, now we can go up to Object and select Group, and it will automatically group those two objects together. That way I don't have to hold down shift every time I want to select my entire glass. So now I want to apply that same gradient style that I put on my decanter, and I want to apply it to my glass. But instead of going through all those same steps, what I'm going to do is select my decanter, go over to Edit and Copy, or Control-C to copy, and then go back to my glass and hit Edit Paste Style. You'll probably remember that we've used that option before. And it should paste the style of the gradient over onto our glass. But you're not going to see that gradient apply to the glass right away. So we're going to have to take our gradient tool to make some adjustments to it. So before we do that, go ahead and lock your decanter layer now so that we don't make any changes to that we don't want to make. And then in the toolbox, select the gradient tool. And now the gradient line that you copied and pasted to the glass, it's not going to show up on the glass. Like mine shows up over here. So we're going to click and drag the square stop to the left side of the glass. So click your square stop and drag it to the left side of the glass, about right here looks good. Now we're going to click and drag the circle stop to the right side of the glass. So click your circle stop and drag it to the right side of the glass. Mine's going to be straight across from my square stop. So now we want to click and drag the gradient stops until you like how the gradient looks. So when you're done the layers panel, lock the glass layer. Okay, so it should look something like this. You can adjust again. I'm going to drag mine down a little bit since I had mine down over on my decanter just a little bit. And once you're happy with how your glass looks, go ahead and lock that glass layer. So next we're going to make some adjustments with our bowl. So we're going to have to go over here and unlock our bowl layer and make sure it is selected. And then we're going to add some highlights or some reflection to our bowl. So come over to your toolbox and grab the Ellipse tool. Then on the canvas, and it says on the widest part of the bowl, click and drag to add an ellipse almost as wide as the bowl. So we're going to click and drag an ellipse. And if it's a little bigger, that's okay. We're going to make some adjustments to it. So in the Fill and Stroke panel, click the Stroke Paint tab and then click the Flat Color button. So the Stroke Paint tab, and then we want this flat color selected. Then back on the canvas, now in the middle part of the bowl, we want to click and drag an ellipse almost as wide as the middle part of the bowl. So click and drag to draw another ellipse right there. And then on the bottom of the bowl, click and drag to draw an ellipse almost as wide as the bottom of the bowl. So we can draw another ellipse down here on the bottom of our bowl. So it should look similar to this at this point, and we're going to make some edits to our ellipses next. So with your selection tool, grab that top ellipse and resize it so it fits just about as close to the shape of the top part of our bowl as possible. So drag it out so that it's really close to fitting that shape, or just inside. I should probably zoom in on this project. So we want that top ellipse to fit just as, I'm going to put mine just inside my edges just a little bit, like that. And then go up to Path, Object to Path, and then select your Nodes tool. And we can go ahead and delete, so select that top square or top node and hit delete or backspace to delete that top node on that ellipse. Now we're going to flatten this ellipse out. You might remember we did this when we first created our bowl, so go ahead and click on the left node and then hold down Control while you click and drag this handle so that it is horizontal. Should look like that. So now we're going to make adjustments to our middle ellipse. Again, we want it to fit right inside the middle part of our bowl so that the curve matches just about the same. Right about there looks good. And now we'll make adjustments to our bottom ellipse. So it says to have our ellipse selected and then go up to Path, Object to Path, and select our node tool again. And now we're going to adjust the nodes on this ellipse to make them fit a little better. So click and drag the bottom node up to flatten the bottom of the ellipse. So first I better stretch mine out just a little bit more so it fits my base a little better. So make sure that your ellipse fits just inside there like so. And then I'm going to go back to my nodes tool and make that a little flatter for my base. And then click and drag the other nodes to fit the bottom ellipse inside. So make your adjustments here to really get this to fit the inside of our base here. Going to drag mine out a little bit and this top part back in a little bit. That looks pretty good. I'm going to grab this node down just a little bit too. So now we want to go ahead and take the same gradient that we applied to our decanter and our glass and apply it to our bowl. So we're going to have to go back in and unlock our decanter layer, get our selection tool, select the decanter, and copy. And then we can select our top ellipse and say paste style. And then we want to go into our stroke panel here and say no paint for our stroke. And then we want to go ahead and copy the style of that first ellipse and apply it to our next ellipse. And then finally to our bottom ellipse. So you might not see the gradients right away, like with mine right here, but now we're going to go in and get our gradient tool to make some changes. So go ahead and select your gradient tool and make sure your top ellipse is selected. And with the top ellipse selected, we're going to redraw our gradient inside of the ellipse. So click about the bottom of that selection of that top ellipse, and then click and drag right up the middle to see your gradient. Then we're going to do that with the middle ellipse. Click and drag. I'm going to drag mine to about right here, and then with the bottom ellipse. Then go ahead and get your selection tool and select your top ellipse again. Then back in our fill and stroke panel, we're going to drag our blur slider over to about 3, or you can go ahead and type in so it looks a little more blurred. Then we're going to select the middle ellipse and do the same thing. Give it a blur of 3. And then also to our bottom ellipse, give it a blur of 3. That way those edges don't look so sharp. And unfortunately, I'm running out of time in this video. I only get 15 minutes per video. So I'm going to stop here and then finish this project in the next video.